Good afternoon, everyone. You're now listening to A Reasonable Conversation on Nusound Radio 92 FM. I'm Prerna, and I'm joined in the studio with Satish. Hi, Satish.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone, and hello, Prerna. Thanks very much for getting us back in on this. Looking forward to today's conversation.
It's been a while, but we're back and are raring to go today.
Yeah.
And just to let all our listeners know, we'll be here till 1 p.m. And today's discussion is on International Yoga Day. If you want to call in, the studio number is 0208 472 9292. You can also text us on 07961 387 787. And you can also tweet in your comments at Nusound 92 FM. So, International Yoga Day, it's been, it was amazing looking at the pictures and just seeing everything that was going on around the world.
It was extraordinary. I was reading some of the statistics that have been gathered about what actually happened. And I think almost 2 billion people, an estimated 2 billion people on one day were engaged in doing yoga practices around the world.
2 billion.
How many countries was it? It was just 150, 170 or something?
Yeah, it was 177 countries.
Amazing.
Well, 107. It all started off with the United Nations General Assembly resolution, and that was supported by 177 countries. Also, to note, 47 of those countries were Islamic nations as well. So it was across the board that there was support for International Yoga Day. And what's interesting to note as well, that was the first resolution which had the highest number of sponsors from all the countries. So it was something that was really supported worldwide.
Quite historical. As you know, I've just spent a bit of time in India working with some of the guys who were preparing for this. And I heard a really lovely story while I was out there as to how this all came about. And, you know, we have this colourful figure, Swami Ramdev in India, who has millions of people, his followers. He helped the current Prime Minister to get elected. He gave him a lot of support and had all of his millions around the country and going up and down saying, you've got to vote, you've got to get involved, we've got to change the nation. And as a result of his support, when Prime Minister Modi became Prime Minister, he promised him a surprise. He said, I'm going to do something for yoga. When I do it, then you'll know about it. And what he was thinking of was the United Nations International Yoga Day. So there's a lovely little snippet of how these boys got together to make it happen.
Oh, wow, that's brilliant, because it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He went to the UN Assembly and he did a little speech about Yoga Day and why should we celebrate it. And he was speaking about how it's such an invaluable gift to India's ancient tradition. It's 5,000 years old, so it's been around for ages.
Well, there are some people who say that it's over 15,000 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it's difficult to quantify some of these things because India has such a huge oral history, and that goes back way beyond recorded history. And much of the yoga scriptures are also oral history as well. But at least an absolute minimum is about 5,000, 6,000 years.
Definitely. I mean, it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as well.
Yeah, and that's 5,000... let's have a look. Last year they celebrated 5,152 years of its anniversary. So that's a long time ago.
It is a long time.
Yeah.
And so what are the origins of yoga? I know you practice it, you've taught it as well in the past.
Yeah, I've been practicing it for so long I can't even remember. I think it was about 17 when I started. It was a family sort of a thing.
Oh, brilliant.
And then I stopped teaching for a while in 2002 and then started to teach again. So where is its origins? Okay, let's get the colourful side of the history. Its origins, they say, are when Shiva taught Parvati. So the first masculine energy in the universe spoke with the first feminine energy in the universe and said, here is a way in which all of creation can reconnect with divinity inside of them. And so there is a long set of scriptures which emerge from that conversation. So Shiva is known as Adi Yogi, which means the first yogi. And anybody who's seen a picture of Shiva in a temple or anywhere like that, they will recognize the posture is a yoga posture. They will recognize that the position of his eyes and many of the little symbols. It's always deep in meditation, yeah. Eyes are half open, so a little bit, his attention is on the world, but also inside, both at the same time. So Adi Yogi is where the science of yoga came from.
Okay. And so when International Yoga Day did take place, it was proposed that it was on the 21st of June, and that was because it was a summer solstice, and it has lots of significance in many parts of the world. So it's the longest day of the year.
It's again, there's what's called mythological stories about why that date was chosen as well, because that is supposedly the day upon which this first conversation took place, and there are many conversations which have taken place, and it seems to have always been on this date. So Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, I read a record where it said that he actually recorded and articulated the Yoga Sutras. They're the phrases which contain most of what's accepted as yoga knowledge these days. It's the core text and teaching, and that too is supposed to have been delivered on the same day, the 21st of June.
So there's got lots. There's not just summer solstice. There's so much more out there.
You get a spooky feeling that the universe was doing its magic again.
Definitely. And is there significance with the summer solstice as well? Because I know it was celebrated by the pagans. Lots of people go to Stonehenge and celebrate over there.
Yeah, well, it's the longest day, as we know, and it's the day when the power of the sun is at its maximum. And much of yoga is all about focusing on the inner light within. And so there's a sun inside and a sun outside. You may have followed in the news that one of the most popular practices that was done in all of these countries was Surya Namaskar, which is a celebration of the energy of the sun,
the
outside
sun salutation.
And inside, the famous sun salutation, which drew some political remarks as well, and we'll touch on those shortly.
Definitely, we've got a lot of controversy to talk about later on throughout the show, but we'll just give our listeners some time to ease in before we
jump in and get them all doing Surya Namaskar.
Exactly. I mean, I've tried Surya Namaskar myself, and it's just amazing. I mean, I started doing yoga a few years ago, and I think it's only when you start doing it and practicing it you can feel the benefits.
It's definitely a doing thing.
Because on the face of it, you can't really understand why so many people do yoga until you actually start doing it and feel the benefits of it.
I think that's the key, isn't it? 2 billion people all engaged in this activity. It speaks for itself. Never in human history has something like that been recorded. As an event, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary achievement, and something that I think is going to be quite pivotal. If the United Nations International Yoga Day keeps gathering and adding more momentum to it, who knows, within 4 or 5 years we may have half of the population of the planet all coming together on one day to do yoga practices.
That would be fantastic. I mean, it already broke 2 Guinness World Records this year. So it was a lot at Rajpath. It was the largest yoga class, which had 35,985 people. So that's a massive number.
Amazing.
And it was actually 84 nations that participated. So it was 177 that gave their support to the UN resolution, but officially it was 84 nations that took part. So it was sort of throughout the world.
Yeah, a huge step forward for humanity, getting together to do something like that, which is totally peaceful, totally holistic, and good for everybody involved.
It is. And what did you do on International Yoga Day?
Well, I was quite lucky. I had a flurry of sort of invitations to participate, and I started my day with some yoga practices at the Vishwa Hindu Kendra, the Southall temple, one of the main temples in Southall. And they have yoga classes there, as do most of the temples up and down the country. And so they started off their day bright and early at 8 o'clock with sun salutations and yoga chanting and things like that. And so that was great. Then from there I shot off to the South Bank. Now, the South Bank had a wonderful, wonderful program. It was organised by the Indian High Commission, and they had their very large rock star sort of stage set up there, and people going up and teaching. Art of Living were there, they were teaching. British Wheel of Yoga were there, taking people through postures, and there were hundreds of people who came. It was almost like a party atmosphere. The weather was great, the South Bank by the river, excellent setting. So that was really good. And then over to Alexandra Palace, where the UNIYD was celebrated by a few other organisations, and that was a very, very large event. I think throughout the day they had almost 8,500 people who came along just to try and see what yoga was like. There were a lot of people who really enjoyed the party atmosphere, but there were many, many strangers to yoga, and they came to have a taste, risk-free, and many of them commented that they hadn't realised it was something they could get benefits from so quickly.
And what are the benefits from doing yoga? If our listeners have heard of yoga but haven't tried it yet, what could you tell them about yoga?
Okay. Firstly, it's entirely without side effects. If you do it properly, there is absolutely nothing negative at all. So it's gently and slowly you get into it. But the effects just go on and on and on. In yoga language, they say there are 5 parts to a human body. And so there's your physical body, there's your mind, there's your intellect, there's your emotional side of the body, there's the energy side of the body. And every one of those benefits from doing practices. So it's not just you get big muscles and you become really flexible and you can tie yourself into the shape of a pretzel or anything like that. But at the same time, it helps to get rid of any toxins that are in the body. It helps you to reorganize your thoughts as well. Your thoughts become a little bit more settled. The battles that go on with emotions and feelings and ideas and fears and worries, all of those. After doing practice, for some reason, you start to feel good, the energy increases in your body, and your mind and your thinking starts to settle down. So as an absolute minimum, you just enjoy being inside the body, and your thinking becomes a nicer place as well. And for most people, that is such a big leap forward in these very stressful times that we live in. It's a great thing just to have any help that'll give you a bit more energy, a bit more relaxation, the capacity to feel refreshed after you've rested. If you're in a good yoga class, you come out of it feeling with a buzz. You don't come out of it exhausted and drained. You come out of it actually with a bit of a buzz and wanting to do more and getting ready for your day. So everybody has to give it a go.
I mean, I know lots of big organisations promote yoga and meditation, especially banks as well. So UBS, I know we have a yoga class there. And that's because, I mean, people's lives are so hectic, they're so full of stress and worries that everyone, I think, needs just a little bit of time to get away, meditate, reflect, and just sort of clear your thoughts, calm down and have a bit of time for yourself.
I think if I can give an example, it's like getting the benefits of sleeping but staying awake.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Right, so you wake up after a good night's sleep refreshed, but you're totally unconscious of whatever happens and how that works. But if you do yoga, you get the same benefits. You wake up, you come out of your yoga practice refreshed, relaxed, as though you've had a nourishing sleep, but you've been awake all the time.
Oh, fantastic. If any of our listeners would like to share their experiences of yoga and what they did on International Yoga Day, the studio number is 0208 472 9292. You can also text us on 07961 387 787. I think we're going to be taking a quick commercial break, and on the other side we'll be speaking more about International Yoga Day.
Advertise on Nusound Radio for as little as £10 per day. For further details, telephone 020 8 472 9994.
Broadcasting live on the World Wide Web. It's newsoundradio.com.
Nusound Radio, 92 FM.
Welcome back to a reasonable conversation on Nusound Radio 92 FM. We've been talking about International Yoga Day, which was on the 21st of June. We have a caller on the line. Hello, welcome to Nusound Radio.
Hi, Prerna. It's Jayesh here.
Hi Jayesh, just to let our callers know, Jayesh is the chairman of the Hindi Lawyers Association. Great to have you on the show, Jayesh.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
And Jayesh, you were actually in Delhi when it was International Yoga Day and with the Prime Minister.
Yes, that was, it was a really good experience actually. I was there, I was in India for a week. And I was very fortunate to have been given, a pass to, attend. So I thought this is going to be a fantastic opportunity. I can't miss this.
So, Jayesh, you were one of the 35,000 in the Guinness Book of World Records now.
Hi, Satish.
Hello there, Jayesh. Great to hear your voice. Have you practiced yoga before, or was this your first dip of a toe in the water?
No. It's not. Yeah, I do practice it on a weekly basis. We've been doing it for a number of years now because, I participate in a local Hindu group in Bushey in Watford.
Oh, brilliant.
And we do that for as part of a warm-up session every, 15, 20 minutes or so. But, stuff like Surya Namaskar, for example, we're all, fully well-versed with that.
And how was it being at Rajpath in Delhi with so many people, with the Prime Minister on the first International Yoga Day?
It was fantastic. I mean, I was to be honest and to be frank, I was in two minds whether to go or not. And one of the reasons was that I thought there's just going to be so many people, and with the heat and things like that, whether it's worth going in, whether I'll get a seat or whatnot. I thought it was going to be very chaotic in terms of organisation. But I got up in the morning, I motivated myself, I got there, and I realised that I would be taking part in something massive and unprecedented. And so if I got this opportunity, I should go along. So I did. So I got up at 4 in the morning, and I was lucky that my hotel was sort of like a couple of streets away from where it took place in Rajpath. And so when I got there, I was completely amazed about the level of organizational, and the thought process that had been put in by the authorities. There was all of those inhibitions that I had beforehand about how to control the number of people. How, is it going to be chaotic? What's going to happen if you can't get through? Because we were given a pass, for example, and it said that you must be seated by 6:10 in the morning, and under no circumstances would you be let inside after that time. So you had to be gone through. You had to have gone through security and all of that, but way before 6 o'clock and
Sure.
be seated. So anyway, so I turned up. So because I was there, a couple of streets away. As I started walking, it was dark. The sun hadn't risen yet, and so. But what I noticed was all the streets had been in the surrounding area had all been cut off by the police. So there were security gates everywhere. So you couldn't drive in unless you had a security pass.
So everything was quite structured and
very structured. Yeah, very
fantastic.
structured.
I mean, because there's such a huge number, so being able to, the government putting everything in place to be able to control the crowds and to make everything run smoothly must have been quite hard work.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of. I think they did a rehearsal as well a couple of days before, or the day before.
That's right.
And to make sure that everything ran like clockwork. But as I said, you had to go through. So I got there, and the coaches knew exactly where to go, where to park. Everyone came off the coach, and there were proper, queues. There was no chaotic behaviour at all. Everyone just queued up. Yeah. It was a nice, and almost immediately you felt as if you were a part of a very joyous, ambient atmosphere. And everyone was on the same wavelength. There was a lot of jokes, a lot of laughter. Everyone was very enthusiastic about taking part. And so you go through one security gate, and that was tightly controlled by the police. You get searched. You weren't allowed to take inside. You weren't allowed to take in bottled water. You weren't allowed to take in bags. You weren't allowed to take in cameras, for example. But phones were allowed. And then you'd go through. And then because of the size of Rajpath, so it goes from Rashtrapati Bhavan all the way down to India Gate, for example. Depending on your pass. Everything was categorized. It was in lettered and numbered format, so you knew exactly where to go. And if you didn't, the police were there to show you.
I think sometimes India gets a lot of bad press, and that's unfair. And I attended the Kumbh ceremony, the Kumbh Mela, the Mahakumbh, a few years back. And on the day that I bathed in the Ganges, 10 million people bathed on that same day. It was just an extraordinary achievement. And like yourself, I felt that it was safe, it was protected, it had been really well thought through. And they'd catered for pretty much most eventualities. And it's almost as though we underestimate it, and they don't really make a lot of noise about how well they organise some of these events. They're fantastic.
No, exactly. I mean, everyone's familiar with yoga, and what was going to happen and stuff like that. But one thing I would stress in India, what I saw, was the sheer level of the organisational skills that these guys have started to, implement into these huge, massive events. And I was completely impressed.
There's something I was wondering. Over here, we had a little tinge of almost like a little bit of consternation, a little bit of negativity about some of the aspects which people were painting as being religious. What was it like over there? Were people conscious that there was a religious dimension to the politics around this event? Did you experience anything like that?
I don't think people were conscious of it. I think this was something really to do with media.
So it was hyped possibly a bit more than the reality.
Yeah, and I think what the government did, just to play on the safe side, you mentioned Surya Namaskar earlier, and there was this controversy, obviously, about doing that. They took that off, so there was no Surya Namaskar in Delhi happening. But a lot of communities took part. There was a lot of people from the Muslim population who took part, and I saw it with my own eyes.
And was Om chanted as well? Because that was another conspiracy that Om should be taken out. There shouldn't be any sort of mantras or Hindu prayers. on
No,
International Yoga Day?
I do remember Om being chanted, actually.
It's quite strange because over here I have an awful lot of friends and colleagues who are English and they're yoga teachers and they run yoga centres. And at the events that I attended, the 3 events that I attended on the day, Om was very much a significant part. And in fact, the non-Hindu, non-Indian yoga teachers were really getting into the swing of Om's much more than I think possibly could have imagined. It's such a fundamental part of getting into a meditative state. So that's really interesting, because I suspect the sensitivity was much more than was warranted. I know the High Commissions, for example, were instructed not to use Om in any of the event that they organised.
Mm-hmm. No, there wasn't. It wasn't. We used. I do remember chanting Om. I do remember that, and the reason why I remember it is because there were 35,000 people saying Om at the same time. You can imagine the frequency and the energy
that
was
vibration
outputted from that.
Must have been amazing.
Yeah.
Very good indeed. Excellent. Are you in India at the moment, or are you in the UK? Where are you calling us from?
I'm back. I'm back home, back to work. I'm actually preparing for a case tomorrow, so...
Okay.
So we won't keep you too long, but just thank you very much for calling in. But just to let our listeners know that the Hindi Lawyers Association will be celebrating International Yoga Day, and that'll be on the 14th of July.
Yeah, I think there are some details on our website anyway.
Excellent.
But I'm glad that you publicised that. You can phone in and seek more details. I'm sure Prerna will give details about the website or where to go to find out information about that. But
Definitely, will do.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your phone call.
Thanks very much, Jayesh.
Thanks for this. Thanks. Bye.
So that was Jayesh sharing his wonderful experience of International Yoga Day in Delhi. So Satish ji, do tell us a bit more about yoga.
Okay. Firstly, it's easy to tell about yoga by telling people what it's not. There are an awful lot of things that have the yoga word stuck on the end of them, and they have absolutely nothing to do with what yoga actually is.
There's so many different
practices.
types. There's Bikram yoga, there's all sorts coming out now. I think there's bodybuilding yoga as well, which I've recently stumbled upon on the internet.
Well, I've come across a couple of even more colourful yogas.
I'm sure.
There's something called doga, which is doing yoga with your dogs.
Oh
so
my God.
you have your dog accompany you when you work through postures.
Wow.
Adds a whole new dimension to what they call downward dog. And I came across something the other day called facial yoga, where you put your cheeks through various practices to... I just don't even go there.
That sounds
But
very
all of that is not yoga.
Okay.
What is yoga? Okay, let's... it's a Sanskrit word, and it means to be connected, or to connect, or the process of connecting. So it's either the state of being connected, or the process by which you get connected. So that's in simplest form. And it's really clearly defined in lots and lots of ancient Indian yoga books. The scriptures are so clear. Here's one of the biggest problems that we have in talking about yoga. In the English language has got some... I think the Oxford English Dictionary has got about 280,000, less than 280,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the size of the English vocabulary, right? Sanskrit has got hundreds of thousands of words.
Wow.
Right? So you can have a concept which you can capture using a Sanskrit word, and that concept doesn't exist in the English vocabulary and mindset, and there's no word for it either.
You can't translate everything from Sanskrit to English, unfortunately.
You have to use 1,000 words sometimes to explain something for which there is a nice, succinct and simple word. And it creates confusion. Like meditation is one word, okay? And people sort of think of meditation as closing your eyes and whatever goes on is meditation.
Yeah.
But in the Sanskrit literature about yoga, it defines the stages of a mindset and the mental activity. And there's concentration, there's mastery of attention, there is then samadhi, or a state of complete tranquility. And none of those have their counterparts in the English language. So when you're talking about yoga, it's a bit of a challenge. So, in one of the scriptures, it defines yoga as being the state when mental disturbances have ceased.
That sounds like a brilliant state to be in.
Yeah. And that is the second statement in the most common yoga scripture, the Yoga Sutras as they're called. And that is the goal, that when you get to the state where you can just switch your mental chatter off, where the thoughts that keep getting dumped into your awareness, even though you don't want them, when they've all become totally tranquil, when that happens, that describes the beginning of the state of yoga. So anything that helps you get to that state is actually yoga abhyas, which is the practices necessary to get to yoga. And one of those practices involves getting the body so it can be healthy and still.
Oh, okay.
So it's all about getting everything still so you can then attain the ultimate level of tranquility. And that's the essence of it. Now, the problem is that most of what passes as yoga is actually the preparation for starting yoga. All the physical stuff has got one particular goal, and that is just for the body to be able to sit still for a long period of time.
Some of the poses are very difficult. The sitting, like the lotus position, it's so you can't just quickly do it. You've got it's stages. It's very hard.
You youngsters, I have to take issue with that, right? If you get a 4-year-old and tell them to sit in the lotus posture, they can sit in it so easily.
When you're a bit older than that, unfortunately, it's a lot harder.
So it's not the posture that's hard. It's what we've done with these bodies over the years, that we don't really keep them flexible. We don't really look after them in the manner that they're given to us. And so all the postures, there are many, many postures which help you get back to that state of flexibility and suppleness, right? But if you think of an athlete, right, getting ready for the high jump, or a swimmer, getting ready for a 100-meter sprint, they'll spend some time in the gym.
Yeah.
But the gym is not swimming, right? In the same way, people who are practicing yoga, they'll spend some time doing the physical stuff, but the physical stuff is not yoga. The physical stuff is like the weight training and getting the body ready for the actual task, which is to try and be as still as you possibly can, because then things start to happen inside. If you can get... I came across one really old scripture, and in it said that if you sit still for 1,720 breaths, right, and it will take 3 hours and 24 minutes, inside your body starts to nourish and refresh itself and to heal itself, and the mind becomes totally different.
Just by sitting still for that period of time? Just by sitting still. But it's not easy to sit still for 3 hours and 24 minutes. I can imagine. After an hour, I get a bit itchy and need to get up and walk around. An hour is good. An hour is great. I remember the days when 20 minutes was a difficulty. Yeah. And so there are lots of preparatory things. And I think the biggest thing is that at the moment, certainly in the UK, a lot of what passes for yoga is actually asana, which is postures. And most of it is remedial, most of it is to prepare the body for then being able to do the internal stuff. Like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they only mention the physical postures in one little phrase. So it's such a small part of what actually yoga is. Absolutely, absolutely. It just says that an asana, a posture, is anything in which you can sit contentedly, comfortably, and stably. So are you able to pick any posture? And that's all it says. That's all it says. It says a posture is stable, contented, and sukham sthiram asanam. And that's what a posture is. The real goal is to sit with your spine perfectly erect, and you're breathing totally tranquil, and the body stable. And then you start to do the internal stuff. So in the scriptures, it's only given one mention. In fact, I remember one of my teachers, I was sort of wandering around in India looking for yoga teachers, looking for a particular guy. And when I met him, he asked me, he said, okay, so what have you done so far? And I said, 17 years of physical asana practice. And he appeared crestfallen. He sort of bowed his head and he said, oh no, I have so much work to undo. And so I asked him, I said, why? And he said, well, in the olden days, when somebody came to a yoga guru and asked for guidance and spiritual wisdom and so on, if the guru thought that he wasn't ready for spiritual practices, he would say to him, go and do asanas for a few lifetimes. It'll keep you busy and out of harm's way. Oh, wow. So that's what some schools have the view of the physical stuff as being something you can do to keep you busy whilst your life takes you through to getting ready for spiritual practice. So it really is a tiny, tiny part of the practices which are on the path of yoga. And it's a preparatory practice. So it's not even the major practices themselves. So it does help, it heals, but it's not the yoga journey by any means. So that's fascinating to know, because I always thought that was the main aim of yoga, because all we know about yoga here is lots of physical postures. I mean, also there's a meditative part of yoga as well, which is quite big. But it's interesting to know that's a very small snippet. So once you have been able to sit still for, say, 3 hours, what's the next stage? Once your body started healing itself? Well, then you get into the areas of the spooky stuff. Tell us more. This sounds intriguing.
Right, okay. Well, lots of people have stumbled into this part of the yoga history and the yoga libraries. And they tell of people who can control their breathing to such a degree that the heart stops, and 21 days later they're still very, very much present and alive, and then they're awakened. And I'm reminded there was a chap called Pilot Baba, they call him, and he demonstrated by being locked in a lead coffin for, I think, 14 days. He was locked in a lead coffin and then buried underground and emerged 14 days after. And there were medical practitioners there, and there were all sorts of people from the press and independent scientific witnesses. There are lots and lots of accounts of similar people who have done this. There was another very advanced practitioner, Hariharan his name was, and he used to, on cue, just switch his heart off. And he would sit there with no breathing going on, totally alert, totally awake, and yet no heartbeat either. And so there is that level of control, which only starts to appear once the body can be tranquil and the mind can actually focus on any particular thing for a long period of time, and then turn your attention inwards. So all of those sorts of things are possible and have been witnessed and have been independently recorded. But that's the next stages of the journey.
That's a very advanced stage if you can stop your heart beating and start it again. That's absolutely fantastic. Well, I think on that note, we should take a commercial break just to register.
And if there's anybody out there whose heart has stopped, please phone in.
Well, for anyone that wants to call in, our studio number is 0208 472 9290. You can also text us on 07961 387 787.
Advertise on Nusound Radio for as little as £10 per day. For further details, telephone 020 8 472 9994.
Welcome back to A Reasonable Conversation on Nusound Radio 92 FM. We've been speaking about International Yoga Day and also the amazing things that yoga can help you to achieve. It's a very strange situation, actually. We were just talking about odd types of yoga, and I was talking about doga and dog yoga and all of these other things. But the number of different types of things that are marketed as yoga has really grown to such a degree. I think it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in the States now. There's so much going on which is attached to yoga. It's actually become a problem now. Yeah. It's almost like there was a first wave when a bunch of non-Indians went off to India and learned some of these practices. And like I said, the physical practices are the tiny tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. But when they came back, they started to teach what they had learned. And as happens, when you've got something which is so new, so helpful, and it causes such a lot of improvement in a person's health and well-being, it becomes really popular. And so what we have now in the UK and in America are what I call the first wave. And they're the people who establish the physical side of the practices. But that represents a bit of a problem, because they've now got their little empires, and they've got their they have their followers, they have their cults, and they are adamant that this is what yoga is, without being aware of the other 4/5 of the science, or the other 7/8 in many cases, which have yet to come out and have yet to take root and to become part of everybody's practice. And so there's a bit of resistance from the established vested interests who say, no, we don't want this newfangled stuff. And it's causing some issues, that boundary between the simple stuff and the deeper stuff. That boundary is becoming quite a major problem. I know there's all sorts of crazy things out there. I think there's naked yoga. People who think that yoga is only Hindu and can be practiced by Hindus. I think they've now started Christian yoga as well, where everything's changed.
This thing about Christian yoga, that was such quite a funny incident that was. I remember when yoga was first talked about as being something which was totally non-Christian. In fact, the Vatican are on record as telling people that yoga leads you into satanic practices and all sorts of nonsense and things like this. And then, after a while, suddenly a Christian yoga appeared, and they changed all the names, but it's not the same. It doesn't deliver the deeper benefits that yoga does. Was it Gandhi, I think he said, first they will laugh at you, then they will ignore you, then they will attack you, and then they will accept that you are right. So I think yoga's going through that process. And very recently somebody raised this whole thing about the religious aspect of yoga. Yeah. And I remember a wonderful quip that Swami Ramdev came out with. He said, okay, breathe in, breathe out. He said, right, has your religion changed?
That's a good one.
And that was it. It just literally shut the whole dialogue of yoga plays havoc with any religious identity or anything like that. So that was a really big help. But there are other aspects to it which have been quite surprising. This United Nations International Yoga Day brought so many other vested interests out of the woodwork.
It was such a shame because, I mean, as Jayesh mentioned and yourself, Surya Namaskar was taken out of the programme for International Yoga Day because apparently it offended Muslims.
Yeah.
And how I don't know, sun salutation can do that.
But I think it's a lack of knowledge more than anything else. It's not... it was painted by some quarters as a pagan worship of the sun out there, and you're not allowed to pray to any physical manifestation or anything in the universe. You have to pray to an unmanifest divinity for many people. And because it was painted as being a pagan type of worship to animals, gods, and the sun, a lot of people were put off by it.
It's such a shame because when we bow down to do anything, there's obviously different objects around us. It doesn't necessarily mean we're worshipping them. You can still bow down and be true to your religion.
Well, behind yoga there is a deeper philosophy, which is one of gratitude. And I think the aspect of being grateful to... the sun is the source of life on this planet. If you switch the sun off, everything becomes just a cold rock.
Definitely.
There's nothing there. And one way of cultivating that feeling of gratitude is to worship anything. Is to worship everything, water, trees, whatever gives you shade, etc. It's just a way of developing an attitude. And the other thing is that within us there is an energy source. And philosophically, yoga also calls that the sun. And so when you're doing the practices, you do it with the internal awareness and the sense of gratitude for a healthy body, life, world for us to live in. Now, if that had been explained properly, there are very, very few people who would have objected to it. But it's those people who've got their little palaces and their little followers and everything else, and they feel very, very threatened when something comes along which questions the premises that they've built their own little establishments and followings with. That, I think, was a big thing. It suddenly appeared everywhere. A lot of people were talking about it without doing it or without having researched it.
Of course, and unfortunately the British media picked up on it very quickly.
Dear.
There were lots of articles saying how India is trying to oppress the poor minorities by forcing them to do yoga.
Yep.
I mean, how cruel. It must be terrible being forced to do yoga.
Well, like I said, there is a sense of being threatened by something which challenges what you've always preached. And yoga definitely pushes a few buttons on those. But it's simple. Breathe in, breathe out. Has your religion changed? No, it hasn't. Have you benefited? Okay, perhaps do a little bit more. So there are very, very simple solutions to this. But you mentioned the way the British media covered this. That was quite surprising. For something which England, Britain and India have got long ties. And the current government have got a very good track record and have expressed a desire for really good improving ties between India and Britain. And so we were all expecting that the British media would leap on it and really enjoy and celebrate this unique first-time global event. But that didn't really happen. It was quite surprising. And the BBC commissioned a programme for television, Bend It Like Whatever. And the BBC's flagship radio programme, Sunday, with Edward Sturton. They also did a piece on yoga. And
tell us a little bit more. What did they have to say?
Well, the one that I really was a little bit disappointed about was the Radio 4 programme Sunday, in which they talked about the beneficial aspects of it very, very briefly, but then really laboured at great length on the things that members of the Muslim community had objected, and that there were religious aspects, and that this was part of the saffronization.
Oh God!
Even breathing can be saffronized, apparently.
And the fundamentalists,
Yeah, that whole thing started again. Rather than focusing on how many people were benefiting from this, rather than being part of spreading mindfulness is a good thing, all of those things which are peripheral benefits from yoga, it was just so disappointing that on such an incredible event they would delve and dig up and rake up unfounded fears, and it's always the bogeyman aspect. That was deeply disappointing. Did you see the BBC TV programme?
Yes, I did. Bend it like Britain.
Bend it like Britain,
Bend
yes.
it like Britain, yes. I mean, I think the presenter did say that she was a bit impatient for yoga, which I think was a bit unfortunate because yoga has so much to offer, and just a matter of sitting for 10 minutes and breathing.
Yeah. What do they say? If you're so busy that you can only do yoga for 10 minutes, you should do it for 2 hours. This is what they say. That you need to slow down. That's part of the benefits.
And it's interesting you mentioned that how the BBC radio programme touched upon how many Muslim nations were angered by Yoga Day, when actually 47 Islamic nations wanted the resolution and took part in International Yoga Day. And just to name some of these these countries, so Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Turkey, Iran, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Oman. So these countries are among the few that supported the UN resolution for International Yoga Day. So I think, why did the British media fail to pick this up? I mean, the United Nations General Assembly, these countries supported it.
Absolutely.
They supported International Yoga Day. They supported Narendra Modi.
I'd say at best it was in poor taste. But the BBC is almost beginning to establish a bit of a track record for some of these anti-Modi, anything which challenges the establishment. They seem to pursue it really, really quickly. Edward Sturton, when he was talking about this, he introduced... the programme started with a couple in Kolkata who were talking about their experiences. That was just for a minute or two. And then he straight away raised the bogey of yoga causing concern amongst Muslims. And then they had another Indian commentator who is known as not really being too aware of the philosophical, spiritual, cultural heritage, religious heritage of India. And so he leapt in, and his first comments were... what was the political angle behind Mr. Modi wanting to do this?
Oh, God.
and too much time, just far too much of it was spent with that aspect, digging up unpleasantness, implying that there are shadows when really there were none.
Well, we've just got a text from Sunny from Seven Kings, and he said he's fed up with the British media and how badly they portray India and the Indian government. Modi's doing so much to help India's image across the globe, and he doesn't understand why they're so insistent on putting India down.
Thank you very much for that message. I think that's a message which is finding favour with many, many people. I came across an initiative, a group of people who were actually getting ready to do something very un-yogic. Mind you, it's totally yogic from one perspective, and that is to have a campaign against the BBC licence because they're so undemocratic and unrepresentative.
They are. I mean, it's such a shame.
Yeah, a relic from colonial times gone by. But that's part of, I think, the process. Now that Prime Minister Modi has announced that he's coming to the UK on, I think, the November the 11th, I think, or thereabouts, it'll be very interesting to watch the BBC and mainstream media prepare for this event and to see how they cover it. Hopefully, they'll cover it using the very, very positive momentum that this International Yoga Day has built up already and build on it. Fingers crossed, that should be an interesting event.
And you touched upon how people thought this was some conspiracy by the Indian government. Swami Ramdev actually spoke out against this, and he said, if you want to oppose the BJP and you want to oppose the Indian Prime Minister, that's fine, but there's no need to start opposing yoga just because of your political affiliations. And I think it's really sad that people try to make it into a political game, thinking, okay, the BJP... they're a pro-Hindu government, yoga's Hindu. Oh no, they're trying to make everyone practice yoga and Hindus. What about the poor minorities?
It's an easy sell, isn't it?
I know. I mean, India has so much to offer,
loose connections and then pander to somebody's fears. And that's been going on for such a long time.
I know. I think with a country that has so much to offer, we shouldn't be scared of what other people may or may not say, that we just oppress ourselves and don't bother to share what we have to offer to the wider world, which is something that's amazing, as you spoke about.
Well, there is an aspect of this which does cause fear in many people's minds. I came across a movie, a yoga movie created by women yoga teachers and practitioners in America. And wonderful, wonderful individuals in their own right. And one thread came through, and I think it was really captured by one of the ladies. She said, in America, practicing yoga is an act of rebellion and revolution. It takes a huge amount of courage, and it's a courageous act. Now, when you think about that in a deeper context, it's actually very valid. One of the the aspects that yoga does give you, tranquility. And everybody's heard the word shanti. Okay, shanti is often translated into peace. But again, that's a mistranslation because it misses some of the sentiments. Shanti is better translated into tranquility. The two are different. If you have a peace process in the Middle East, you don't feel anything. But if you have a tranquility process in the Middle East, then suddenly there's an extra dimension that the individuals have to become tranquil. And yoga makes you tranquil. And when you're tranquil, you can think clearly. And it's really hard to pull the wool over the eyes of somebody who can think clearly from a position of tranquility. And there are lots and lots of vested interests whose benefits lie in making sure people don't think clearly and with tranquility.
I mean, there was an article that I was reading about prisoners doing yoga and meditation. They felt so much better for it. And in the run-up to International Yoga Day, the Indian government were saying that if everyone starts practicing yoga, there will be world peace, because if everyone's peaceful and tranquil...
Yeah, within one generation.
No one will feel the need to fight each other over things that are probably so meaningless.
But there's no money in tranquility.
That's true.
There's a lot more money in wars and maintaining strife between people.
We've got a Facebook message from Priya. She said that she agrees that India should be celebrated and our heritage and culture should be celebrated, and why should we have to hide this because of a few people?
Yeah, there is a prophecy in one of the ancient Indian scriptures which says that when the world enters a stage of darkness, India's role as Vishwaguru, as the teacher to the world, will come to the forefront. And there are people mentioning that now the knowledge that's in India about the herbal medicines, the Ayurvedic medicines, the yoga practices, all of that's going to come pouring out of India in a great big wave to bring tranquility and health and healing to the wider world. And maybe Modi is the person who has started this, opened the floodgates to let it all pour out.
Yeah, why not? I mean, there's so many benefits. Even now, so many people are turning vegetarian. There's a massive vegan movement as well, because people are realising the benefits of certain aspects of food, Ayurvedic medicine, meditation, and what it can do for you. It's an alternative therapy that actually works better than normal medicines.
I think this has actually been a wonderful beginning. I was watching how all of the different events were being organised, and sometimes it's so hard to even organise a tiny little event. The logistics defeat you, and the people involved, they have their own issues and difficulties. But the events that came together around this United Nations International Yoga Day here in the UK, I was absolutely delighted and stunned at how easily it all happened. It was only a few months ago that the announcement was made. Yeah. And yet within a few months, people organised events at Alexandra Palace. There was the Shivananda ashram with their yoga boat going up and down the Thames, chanting Om and doing all sorts of wonderful things. There was the High Commission. And so all of these things...
organised a yoga event. They do Bhagavad Gita classes in the city.
Yeah.
So Sham, and they were also featured on the BBC documentary as well, which was fantastic. That's right.
And so all of these things happened without too much preparation, but now we have a whole 12 months between where we are today and the next United Nations International Yoga Day, the 21st of June next year. And there are people and organisations already beginning to plan now to make sure that next year's is even better, bigger, fuller, and with so much more participation.
I mean, if 2 billion people participated this year, we can only imagine what will happen next year. It'll just be phenomenal.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to have 2 billion people chant Om all at the same time? I'm sure the Earth would shift on its axis.
Definitely.
Did the Earth move for you with that Om? Yes, it did.
And for those of you that can't wait to practice yoga till next year, there are other events that are going on. As I mentioned, the Hindu Lawyers Association will be celebrating International Yoga Day, and that's going to be on the 14th of July. So there's more information about that on the Hindu Lawyers Association website. There's also some research being done into can yoga help diabetes and obesity, and that's starting on Thursday, the 9th of July, and the contact for that is Ravi Banaut. So do contact him to find out a bit more. So Satish, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been amazing. I've learned so much about yoga, that I didn't even know before. And
I unintentionally revealed a little bit of the spooky stuff, but that should also whet people's appetites. I think the message has to be, if 2 billion people are trying it, there is no reason why everybody shouldn't go out there and try it in some way, shape or form. Just give it a go, and if it works and you feel benefit, why not carry on with it? It has to be done. Definitely. And I think it's better you have to try it to believe it. I wasn't practicing it before, and after practicing yoga, I just couldn't believe how amazing it is. So excellent. So once we wrap up here, we'll just levitate out the door and hopefully